The most important thing in life is to recognize that really it's all about people. What we're trying to do is to solve problems for humanity. We are trying to enhance the quality of life.
Georgia Tech is an outstanding university. They train engineers, they train scientists, but since it began, it has always ignored the arts. And the provost, Dr. Raphael Bross, had come to the conclusion that they've got to increase the amount of art and the arts into the campus and into the curriculum.
Georgia Tech tends to have an image of sharpness and detail, of no ambiguity. That's not reality. Reality is more ambiguous than that. Art brings that to your thinking. I call it rounding the edges of people and the way they operate. That's what art brings to Georgia Tech.
The colleges of engineering here at Georgia Tech each became very specialized and almost self-contained. And Dr. Bross correctly saw that they were focused in as opposed to focus on the horizon. And so in creating this council, he recognized that fine art, sculpture, music, painting, could provide an avenue for intercommunication among the various silos, which would broaden the education of the engineers because they would then see the relationship between the art of design and the logic of engineering.
Provost Bross created a council. The council raised some money, and they got very active. They bought pieces of art. Some of it is major art, but they had none from a Georgia Tech graduate. So Dr. Bross came up and met with John Portman and explained to him what they were trying to do. They're trying to make engineers more creative, and he said, we want you to do a piece for Georgia Tech because you're a graduate of Tech and you have something to say, and you are who you are. And John said, I'd have to think about it. He started working on it. John said until he got something he was happy with, he'll not commit to it. And he went to work, and he worked for a year on design. Toward the end of that year, he got where he didn't like it. He didn't like it for several reasons, but he felt he had to make some statement that once it was explained to whoever was looking at it would mean something to him. And so he started over, and he worked the second year. At the end of that year, about the end, he came up with the design he thought was very good. He was happy with it, and that's the design that we're after now.
Koan is a Zen Buddhist phrase that refers to a puzzle that the monks used during meditation to help them unravel great truths. My father, John Portman Jr., was a man of many talents. You would first have to say he was a great architect. As an architect, he had a profound and lasting influence on the history of architecture, not just in America, but in many other countries around the world. My father was also a painter. He was also a sculptor. He also designed furniture and lighting fixtures. He would say, if you can design one thing, you can design anything. You just have to put your imagination to work and try to find a solution in your design that hasn't been discovered yet.
I knew of John Portman as this iconic figure, this iconic architect and developer, but I didn't know much about him as an individual or his individual vision. I knew more about his work and how he projected architecture to the world.
Mr. Portman was famous for his atrium hotels, and when you go inside, it is as if you're in a sculpture. The architecture is a work of art.
His prominence, he was a graduate here at Georgia Tech. It means a lot that I get to work on this project, and I get to work with Mr. Portman and Portman Architects.
I have friends that are architects, and when I bring up Mr. Portman's name that I'm working on a project, they just can't believe it. They're in awe.
Mr. Portman's architecture is known all around the world, from Shanghai to San Francisco to New York. Obviously, Peachtree Center is fabulous and really rebuilt, redeveloped downtown Atlanta. The Shanghai Center, the first Western development in China, is a fabulous landmark that everybody knows. One of my favorites is the Marriott Hotel overlooking Times Square. We had several years ago an alumni event there and had lots of alumni from the college at a AIA conference meet there. And that site is unbelievable in the way it's integrated into the crossroads of America at Times Square. It was interesting, he really always wanted to make the point of how important people were. He looked at how do you serve people and meet their needs with his architecture. And he is probably the most recognized architect of the second half of the 20th century.
He's among, in my opinion, among the cream of the crop. But where he also excelled, he was a fantastic businessman. He took risks that others would never take. He succeeded at it tremendously. He was a community leader, a civic leader. And in many ways, when we see it, the Atlanta skyline is his, literally his.
Well, we've produced not only Martin Luther King, but Jimmy Carter as Nobel Peace Prize winners. There should be a Nobel Prize for urban design, and you'd have to give it to John Portman. The carpets, the walls, the statues, all come from within him. Apart from all of the economics, apart from all of the politics, just as artwork, this is an expression of 21st century genius.
You know, Georgia Tech is an engineering school, technological university. With those phrases, you don't much think of art, but art is so much of our psyche and what we live with day in and day out. Art gives us a spirit and lifts us. John left a pretty good legacy in this city. I think the Koan is a wonderful statement of his legacy. Just a terrific gift to Georgia Tech.
We were selling some shower pans to the Indigo Hotel that they did in downtown Atlanta, and we were working with a project manager there who came to our factory and got a tour. And we had a meeting with some of the development team and the designers. The project manager we were working with asked us if we could meet with Mr. Portman. We told him we're an employee-owned company and we're here in Georgia. And he also was asking specifics about our material and our process. And so he really took to letting us know that he thought we could do it.
One of the best ways to grow business is to solve problems for people. So when Mr. Portman brought the sculpture to us, we didn't hesitate. We knew that we had the resources to make his vision come true.
He first came to us and asked us to build a 21-foot tall sculpture, and that seemed doable. When we presented that proposal to Mr. Portman, he took our 21-foot sculpture and slid it off to the side and slid in a 40-foot sculpture and said, this is what we really want, this 40-foot sculpture.
But we ourselves could not build a 40-foot tall sculpture. So we had to look sort of outside of MTI, but knowing that this was what he was spending most of his time on, it really rang through that we have to figure this out. This is something that was no longer a choice, but something that we as a team came back and said, we are going to do this.
I try to observe what people do, their reactions to environmental circumstances. And when I can catch people doing that, I'm learning something that's really very, very good, that strikes to the heart of the humanity of our humanity. If I do that, I'm going to make something happen that can stand the test of time.
My father built 2 houses for our family, and he called each one Enteleke. Enteleke 1 is here in Atlanta, and Enteleke 2 is in Sea Island. The Greek word enteleke was used by Aristotle to distinguish between potentiality and actuality. Enteleke is the realization of a dream. I think for my dad, whenever he would start any project, it would always start with the dream, the thought, the potential. For 3 years, engineers and craftsmen have worked tirelessly in trying to determine how to create this sculpture successfully. It's been difficult, it's been complicated, it's taken much longer than anyone expected. This beautiful, complicated yet simple, soaring sculpture is the realization of my dad's last design dream. It is Entelechy.
Mr. Portman knew he was sick, and we got 2 JP&A people to work on it with him so they could get it where we could explain to people what we were trying to do. In other words, once we got it on paper and we could look at it in 3D and move it around, we all realized it was really an outstanding piece.
I worked with Mr. Portman for 21 years, and it's my really honor and my pleasure to work with him, especially for his last masterpiece. The form is very geometric. Also, it's all curved and twisting. And how do I put them into a computer? That's a big challenge.
All of a sudden, one day, I got a call from John and Mickey and say, would you come to our office? And I said, sure. When I got there, what I saw was the model. He had quietly worked in thinking through how is this going to look. The concept you see now was what I saw then. It hasn't changed. He went as far as, without telling anybody, coming to campus, find a location that ended up pretty near to where it's going to be. He had a film made about it, an animation, so we could see how it would look from different angles in 3D. It was amazing.
Adrenaline Powerboats was contacted by MTI Baths, a common material vendor that we share, noticed that we had the 5-axis router capability, a large envelope router, and that we did projects outside of our wheelhouse of boat building.
Adrenaline Powerboats is a perfect fit for the Koan project because of our expertise in many different fields. We create state-of-the-art, go-fast powerboats, things that people like to ooh and ah over, and doing it all in-house under one roof is very unique.
When I went down to the first meeting with Mickey and the folks from MTI, they came to me last at the table and said, well, how would you build this? I just thought carbon fiber, this thing has to be built out of advanced, lightweight, rigid composites. That's just was my only thought. I mean, they're building airplanes out of it now. The automotive industry has really taken to it. It has the same tensile strength as steel at a fraction of the weight.
We were architects and structural engineers. We knew how to build buildings out of steel, but the only material we thought would work would be carbon fiber, which they use to build spaceships, they use it to build airplanes, but they sure don't use it for other things like this.
So the framework of the sculpture will be carbon fiber. The exterior will be made of MTI sculpture stone material, which is the same material we use here to build these bathtubs and sinks and showers. We manufacture these in Sugar Hill, Georgia, and it's basically ground minerals and resin, which is mixed together, poured into a mold. We bake it and hand finish it into a soft, luxurious matte finish. And Mr. Portman fell in love with that actual finish and wanted to create the sculpture out of that finish. And so it's going to have to be a very thin layer of our sculpture stone material over the carbon fiber material. So the challenge is to create a super strong product that'll hold up in the weather outside, but also will look and feel like a hand-finished stone.
Mr. Portman loved the MTI sculpture stone material because of its organic properties as well as the look and feel of the material. Here at MTI, we start the process with our molds. We hand polish them. We polish them with a car wax to get them nice and shiny. We pour a material called the sculpture stone material, which is 70% natural organic minerals mixed with 30% high performance resin. And once it hardens, it is 100% solid, no air in it whatsoever, through and through, which creates a nice quality but heavy product. For the sculpture, the Koan sculpture, we needed something that was going to be lighter. So we came up with a process where we took our 70% natural organic minerals and with a sprayable resin and actually sprayed the surface of the mold and backed that with a carbon fiber, and that became the solution for Koan.
The basic structure of each ring is a sandwich panel. It's a 5-inch thick cross section through each ring. Each outer skin is comprised of about a 3/4 inch thick carbon composite panel. And in between that panel is structural gridding that's wrapped in carbon fiber. It's kind of like a skeleton on the inside of the ring. We use epoxy resin and carbon fiber. That's our specialty here at Adrenaline. And that gives us the most compact, lightweight, strongest composite part that we can build outside of building in an autoclave. We're utilizing the carbon as a construction material to kind of defeat physics.
And the thing we couldn't do ourselves was we couldn't check the designs. We didn't know how. The weight of it was not the big problem. The big problem was going to be wind, but we couldn't use a wind tunnel to test this model. It was too thin. We couldn't get instrumentation on it to measure it. It just wouldn't work. The only way to do it was do a virtual wind tunnel test. In our business, we've never seen a virtual wind tunnel test. But it is a huge computer program that was developed for the aerospace industry. So we knew where to go for that. Georgia Tech is the largest aerospace engineering program in the country. The process that we did here was first to get the information from the wind tunnel, virtual wind tunnel, the loads, the material, the geometry. We build our model. We simulate this model in a supercomputer that we have here on campus with more than 100 processors to check every and all of the parts and the components of the structure to make sure that every portion was acceptable in order to be manufactured.
Most materials are what we call isotropic. So let's say if you take a metal, you have a metal sheet and you pull it in one direction or you pull it in the other direction, the response is the same. When you have carbon fibers, it has preferred directions, and that's what we call anisotropy. So when you pull in one direction, it might be very strong and stiff, and the other direction might be very weak and compliant. To put that into a model is not trivial. And if you want to add more complexity, the way that carbon fiber is built, in one layer, the fibers might go in this direction. In another layer, the fibers might go in a different direction. So to account for that in calculations is not the standard procedure, let's say, in civil engineering. It is in aerospace engineering.
The other part of the project that I'm working on is for a ceramic coating to be applied to the sculpture. This ceramic coating will make it graffiti-proof and beautiful for the life of the sculpture. It is primarily used on exotic cars, yachts, boats, and now, for the first time, applied to a sculpture.
We want a very matte finish. I've created a formula with our coating to not change at all the texture or the look or the sheen of our sculpture. It's a ceramic coating that covalently bonds to the surface and creates a layer of protection over it. So it takes the porosity out of the surface and hardens, generally to the hardness of 9H, the hardness of glass. So Mr. Portman would be very proud of that.
This is a gigantic structure, 40 feet tall. They have to withstand 115 miles an hour winds. And I remember we were invited one evening to go and to meet Mr. Portman in his office. And we got there. Imagine that was like, incredible moment. Like we were like really humble just being there. And I was told to describe Mr. Portman, our work. And I said, well, Mr. Portman, this is the first time I'm being asked to compute a structure so it does not fly. Right? Because we do structures that fly here. I remember he laughed a lot and it was like a very nice connection between us. He really liked that line.
I was an investment banker doing mostly mergers and acquisitions. So this sculpture project was a huge diversion from what I'm normally used to and a great challenge. How did we price this project? I call it creative conceptual estimating. And that is you take a big guess at what do you think it could be and how do we do that? We obviously had to understand the costs and get estimates from the subcontractors. This was their first time in doing such a project, so they were under the same situation where they had to basically guess at what they were doing. The other thing we did was we looked at the sculpture market in the city of Atlanta or elsewhere. Pricing sometimes is not available, but we certainly did do our research on that and then readjust at that point. But that's why we had to understand the market for sculptures, which is there's not a lot of information out there about that.
By now we knew we were putting together a team that was going to take a lot of controlling to keep them all on track to doing what we want to do. But we were pleasantly surprised. We found that they were all eager to try this, and talked to Mr. Portman, and he just looked and he said, "Mickey, y'all just gonna have to do it." He was getting very, very ill. He says, "Finish it for me." So that's what we're doing.
And I try to be able to understand the kind of things that we innately react to and develop that into something that is an enhancement. What can I do to create things that lift people, helps them in some way? It's what we can do in life. Otherwise, what are we doing?
I think the Koan will have an enormous emotional impact on people, almost as if they're part of it. They'll be walking through this statue, this sculpture, experience different lights, different shadows. And as the sun or moon travels through the sky, there will be an infinite number of designs to experience.
So now we're getting all sorts of people, all sorts of groups involved in what we're doing. And we developed estimates, we developed agreements. We ended up where the owner of this piece that was going to own getting it built was going to be JCP Sculptures. That was me. Ultimately, it's being paid for by the alumni of Georgia Tech, alumni and friends.
The Koan, in my opinion, is the world's most technically advanced sculpture. The genius is in that it looks abstract, but the rings are identical and stacked such that it's manufacturable, just as Mr. Portman designed it.
Even though we have seen it in CAD, we have seen it in 3D, we have played with it, it's something that's going to be so monumental that you are not going to realize what it's like until you actually see it in place. It's kind of like trying to tell someone what is the Grand Canyon like, right? You have to go and see it. You cannot watch any picture of the Grand Canyon.
There were some extraordinary things about his concept. He felt like it should be large enough that you could see it from over most of the lower campus. We had selected a position for it, and we selected it right outside of the College of Architecture buildings.
And what he was proposing was a sculpture to be in the turnaround at the Clough Commons, which is a loading dock. It's a bus drop-off and pickup, a very densely populated pedestrian pathway. And I didn't think that was the right location. We thought placing it in this green space between Clough and the College of Design really resonate with Mr. Portman because he wanted students to see it and engage with it. You know, this pathway right here is a significant east-west pathway. This pathway right here along Tech Green is significant north-south. The ebb and flow of this site and this location is pretty significant. Adjacent to Clough Commons, which is the academic home for our undergraduates. So every undergraduate will have a class in this building, and they cannot not see and interact with this building.
You're going to see this thing from a long way away. So you may get glimpses of it coming down the street, and you're going to think, what is that? Once you come down 4th Street, you're going to be able to see part of that sculpture, and when you come into the green, the size of it alone, it's going to be dramatic. It's in a prominent spot on campus, in close proximity to the student center. So you're going to have the majority of students walking by this every day.
We've been involved in this project for over 2 years now. McCarthy couldn't be happier to be involved in it. We feel like that we can build anything. To be able to have this on our resume is awesome. We're able to take it at 50% documents, go through all of the obstacles and challenges that come along with building something so unique here. And then to have it right here on Georgia Tech campus, it just doesn't get any better than that.
Then we started looking very carefully at what he wanted. 3 intertwined pieces, and he had a reason for it. He wanted it to be really spectacular.
It's 3 rings. They have unique special joints in each place that are embedded in the carbon material. That's all engineered, machined to a precise joint to make that as strong as possible.
When you look at this sculpture all together, it's very confusing even to look at. It's really a quarter shape that is just repeated and then rotated several different ways.
And so we only made one mold. The sculpture is made up of 3 pieces. Each of those circles are made out of 4 identical pieces that are put together in different ways. The only straight piece is right here. These 3 circles then are built, assembled this way, and then they are put into place and connected.
We've made provisions in our mold to leave depressions in the parts so that we can wrap carbon fiber around them and finish the joint. And that's the process by which we build each part.
What makes it extraordinary is the size and the number of pieces that are together, but the fact that they're the same pieces, the same shape. That's a major feat, both of engineering and fabrication. How rare is that kind of technology working on a piece of art, a piece of sculpture? That's fantastic, it's wonderful.
Mr. Portman was making a statement to the future faculty, students at Georgia Tech about what you're creating at Georgia Tech. What products are you doing? What new theories are you developing? And he believed the 2 things you've got at Georgia Tech, you've got knowledge and you've got research.
But if you don't have creativity to go with those, then you don't fulfill the expectations of what it's meant to be. One of the great strengths of John Portman's designs, he was always seeking new beginnings, new directions. He wanted to evolve in his architecture and in his art and not be static. And this sculpture really was a pioneering effort on his part to do something different than everything he had done before. And that made him very happy.
Koan. It's all new ideas, materials we've never used. If it's pleasant looking, it'll draw people to it, and they'll be curious as to what it means. And then he's teaching them that in order for you to succeed, you've got to learn, you've got to do research, but you've got to do it with great creativity. And that fit right in with the initiative that Georgia Tech has been doing about creativity, about the arts.
The solution is in the problem. And as Michelangelo said, Pietà was in this block of marble. So I got to take this marble off and end up with a Pietà. And so you take the problem at hand, whatever it happens to be, and you expose everything about the problem. And you come out of that problem, and the answer starts revealing itself. It's trying to tell you what it wants to be if you've got the courage to listen.
Well, we didn't have a marble, but we had this sculpture with all its external surfaces, and we could work only inside that. So if you were able to open the structure and look inside, you will see these grids. We call them ribs. So these ribs that goes in one direction and the other direction, following the curvature of the sculpture. It's kind of like we had to carve it out of this surface that was given to us by Portman. So the solution is in the problem.
The major challenges have been the connection points between rings and from the rings to the ground. Mr. Portman designed them to be hidden so that one edge of the ring hits another edge of the ring, and there took a lot of work to make those connection points strong and completely custom.
There finally came a point in the design phase where we said, hey, we just need to grab the outside of the ring to create a good connection to the structure. And that was after doing some preliminary load testing and realizing the forces that each ground connection took were very substantial.
We ran the simulations and the numbers did not match. So we had to iterate a lot in terms of how to make the structure more reliable, but without exposing any internal structure outside for the common person to see it. We wanted to have the structure to be as clean as the first drawing of John Portman.
We have followed Mr. Portman's design to a T with one exception. If you look at our early models, he wanted to put it on a round ball. But we've had to develop something that looks more like feet for a spaceship. Otherwise, this is exactly what he envisioned. It would have been much easier to make changes, but we don't do that. This is his design, and we're going to see it and build it the way he envisioned it.
The Koan sculpture, it has a very almost unbalanced final assembly. So the point loads around the base of the sculpture are not equal. And the rings are very difficult. How to build them in enough pieces to transport to the campus has been difficult. The logistics behind installing them on the campus has been difficult.
And that's why you need the Portman team. And that's what they bring to the project. They bring all the logistics. They bring all their know-how on building large structures. Not sculptures, but they build high-rise buildings. Even the way the rings are designed, instead of being a single piece, there are two pieces put together. And that is because of transportation issues. That's the way they have to go under bridges, they have to go on the highway, they have to reach Georgia Tech.
They're huge, each piece, between 2,500 and 3,000 pounds. Had to need a special permit. It was supposed to leave at noon, then it was 2:30, then it was 4:30. The truck made it near Interstate 285, and the restrictions were they couldn't get on that, so we had to delay it until after 6 o'clock. It finally arrived here on campus, two pieces, slightly lit in dim light so we could really tell what it was. You know, I was really excited and shared it with a whole bunch of people on campus.
When it showed up on site, that's the first time I've seen the piece. It's a challenge, trying to figure out which way center of balance. With curvature pieces, it's hard to judge. You have to use your experience and your knowledge of what you know to add safeties, to strap straps back so they can't slide and stuff like that.
This is once in a lifetime gig. Whenever you got about $250,000 to $500,000 on your trailer, it gets you a little worried. So we were able to keep it tied to the trailer and keep it on there and get it on to its destination.
And today is the first day where we can actually see things fall into place and visualize what that statue is going to look like. Up till now, we've only seen little pieces and little parts, and now you're starting to see something complete that actually gets moved. Ring number one being the most complicated, we really thought that was going to be the most difficult to install because of the different angles for the clamps and the bases. We've got about 12, 13 people on site now. We've got riggers in there, we've got scaffolding people, we've got MTI people still working on the next ring that are a little tricky to not only put the 500-pound clamps onto the rings, but then to also position them onto the site where you have 3 locations that we're going to be mounting to, and 2 of those are also on a different plane with different angles. It turned out to go very smoothly. We had a couple of glitches, but they worked through it pretty quickly. And Mickey's been here on site just about every other day for the past 3 weeks. He loves seeing it. Today was probably the best day ever for him because he's been pushing and driving this whole project really for the past year and a half.
Now we put up ring 2 last night. The install of the first 2 rings went very, very well, exactly as we wanted them to go. We all expected to have problems, but we didn't. And the reason we didn't is Mike and his people. We first fitted them up in the shop and made all the corrections we needed to make that for these 2 rings. Nothing's exactly easy, but it went smooth and quick simply because of the good planning that Mike did to make sure that they fit.
So this little 3D model has been a lifesaver throughout the project. You keep in mind, you know, when you look at it as a full assembly, it kind of makes sense, even as twisted and curved as it is. But when you're looking at a portion of one of the rings orientated flat on a shop floor, it's kind of hard to build it in your mind. So we've used this 3D printed model quite a bit to kind of get our bearings for each next step.
The piece really evokes what John wanted, which is the idea of knowledge and research and creativity. That creative sense, that creative envelope that is necessary to make everything else work and be successful is captured by Koan. It's a year delayed. I hate saying it and admitting it, but it's a year delayed. But it's going to be worth every minute of wait. And I think Georgia Tech is lucky. Georgia Tech will forever be remembered as the place that houses the Koan piece of John Portman.
When I think back over my career with John Portman, I believe that some of my biggest mistakes is when John looked at me and asked me, do you think we can do that? I think some of the biggest mistakes I made was when I said yes. And then it nearly killed us trying to do it. But we always got it done. Using all of that knowledge, using all of the research that had been done. But it took creativity to get it there. What it really is, a process of Koan, a discussion, a debate, looking for truth.
What's been interesting with the exposure to some of the engineers involved in the program that have aerospace expertise is how many of our original thoughts actually made it to the final design table. It just goes to prove that the practical engineer that's been taught by experience carries a lot of weight in a design situation where the big question mark is, how do we do it?
MTI Bath started working on this project with Portman in June of 2015. A lot has happened since then, and a good bit of the manufacturing of the sculpture happened during 2020, during COVID.
It's been a long journey to get to this point we are today. There's only about 50% of the students on campus because of coronavirus. It's half in class, half virtual learning, so there's really not a lot of people milling around campus right now.
Of our 300 employees, approximately 150 were affected by COVID, either by having COVID or being exposed and having to quarantine. So we were working with a really short staff to start out with, but we had to send some of our very best artisans to Lincolnton to get this project done.
So the coronavirus, COVID-19, really had an impact on the schedule, on the fabrication of this piece. Mike, the manufacturer, some of his crew contacted coronavirus, so they were with half of a crew for weeks at a time. That impacted the schedule and the arrival of the pieces to campus.
We had to send Kevin Hyde, who's our VP of Engineering and Manufacturing, over to work directly on this sculpture while at the same time having him back at MTI to make sure that our projects were getting out the door and everything was engineered properly for all the new products that we work on.
I think we were all kind of struggling with people that were home, trying to continue on with our businesses and also manufacture the statue. We tried to keep certain people on this particular project, not on other projects, so I think by that segregation, we kept it moving along.
The sculpture itself is one that projects the future, is one that rises to the sky, one that tries to elicit creativity and open the mind. So that reaching out, that sense of achievement, that sense of happiness will converge the minute we get out of COVID and everybody sees the piece.
Ring 1 went well, Ring 2 went well, and today's the biggest day of all. We bring out Ring 3. They're gonna bring it out, we're gonna turn it at about a 45-degree angle, and then they'll fly it up on top of Rings 1 and 2, and then they have steel plates and bolts that they will use to connect all that together. Ring 3 is the most difficult ring to install because it's going to be hanging in the air. There's so many different angles and compound curves and connection points and getting all that engineering figured out so that everything connects properly.
Oh, we've been waiting for this day for 3 years. 60 stories skyscraper might be last 4 or 5 years. But for these 3 rings only, it still takes 3 years. We have a ring 1 and a ring 2 together, but they are not stable yet. So we really needed the 3rd ring on top of that, and the final of the structure, and everything is done. Before Mr. Portman's final day, he called me into his office. He wanted to talk about this structure. He wanted to make sure people will be making it happen. So I got this burden on my shoulder, okay? Every day, I try to make it happen as soon as possible. Like finally it's here, today.
The challenges on the 3rd ring have been the alignment of all the connections. On the CAD systems, everything lines up great, and then you go to build it, then you put pieces together, and all those tolerances have to stack up. And now with the last ring, we're seeing how they all fit. And so far, everything seems to fit well. I think this is a great example of different businesses and different people with different technologies coming together to create art. Worked very, very closely with Georgia Tech and their engineering group. MTI's products are on the statue. Adrenaline Boats did all the fabrication, so it was a good relationship with all of us.
So now that we've gotten Ring 3 mounted, we can go back and write the instruction manual on how to build this thing. It's obviously a very custom project, it's never been done before. And now that we're at the tail end of the project and everything seems to be aligned as expected, we have a standard operating procedure on how to do the next one.
That's what makes this so interesting. A world-renowned architecture firm, a manufacturer of $1 million speedboats, and us here at MTI Bass, the premium bath company, all coming together to build something that is truly extraordinary, that is the Koan sculpture.
And how did that group come together and complete such a project that's never been done before? And you had to make sacrifices to do that. And when there were changes, and sometimes they were expensive and we had to figure out ways to finance it. And sometimes you just ate the cost of it because you knew it was going to contribute to the overall good of the project. And ultimately, it was our mutual respect for one another that allowed us to work together and work through issues in the name of the project, that John Portman, his last designed product, we were able to push it through and get it done. Maybe not in the initial time frame we wanted or expected, but it was done and done correctly. That thing will last forever. You had that end game in mind every time we had issues. So that was a big factor, I believe, in having all these parties come together and work together. And it's a beautiful, beautiful piece of art with a great story behind it.
So Miss Portman, if it is heaven, he would like to know it is finally is here.
Our fondest hope is that as we finish this, we get it cleaned up, and the students and the faculty can approach it. I hope they enjoy it as much as we thought they would. And I'm proud of everybody who worked on it. This was John Portman's last design problem. This is the last thing he worked on. But I think we produced what he imagined. And I believe other people who get a chance to enjoy it will enjoy it greatly.
When you are responsible for a whole mass of things coming together, you have to be concerned, you have to be interested in everything. I'm interested in everything.
For me, it's very rewarding, actually heartwarming, to see the process my father went through in evolving this creative design. And this is how creativity works. You do something, and that'll lead you into another direction, which leads you into another direction. Finally, you see what you were looking for. And when he discovered what he was looking for, it's what you see today in the sculpture. That was a very happy moment for him. And if it wasn't for Mickey Steinberg, who figured out how to do something that's never been done, it wouldn't be built. So my father is the visionary of it, and it was his creativity. But Mickey, as he has my father's whole life, figured out how to implement the creative ideas of John Portman.
When you get into painting and sculpture, you can go and seek your spirit, a spirit that's not hemmed in. Let whatever's in there, let it the hell out. No, don't worry about it. Don't try to preconceive it. Just be you. Some people like it, some won't, but what the hell? That's true anyway. So that's the way it is.
I once tried to paint. I didn't even like it.
I can understand that.
All right.
Koan was my father's last design endeavor. In the months before he passed, we all watched as he zeroed in on design and engaged Mickey, Steve, and engineers from Georgia Tech. They began to solve the multitude of means and methods required to successfully construct Koan. Mickey took on this project like no other. He was determined, tenacious, passionate about its completion. When I talk about the reality of a dream, taking Koan from its potential to its actuality, I have to acknowledge that this could have never happened without Mickey Steinberg. And for that, my family is indebted to him for this great accomplishment.
There's a reason why knowledge, research, and creativity
are so important here at Georgia Tech. A lot of places have knowledge and research, but creativity is what really leads to innovative solutions to the kinds of problems we'll face in the 21st century.
Having the Koan sculpture in the foreground with this building as the background explains even further the concept of the relationship between the art of design and the logic of engineering, because this sculpture deals with the curvilinear nature of space and time, a la that of Einstein and Picasso, as opposed to the linear concept which Renaissance architects explored.
Me being a Georgia Tech guy, I'll be back here for the rest of my life, so I can always bring my future generations out here and be like, hey, I built that thing.
Future generations can come and still be in awe to build something that lasts forever. That would be the best thing that this sculpture can bring to our campus.
I think that sculpture kind of like merges the art and all the science and engineering that we put into it, and I hope people get to appreciate it.
I've had probably 6 or 8 people on site down at the Fabrication shop working with them on there, and I had an additional 3 to 4 people here, and then we've got a total of about 12 to 14 of us that have worked on this. The individuals who have worked on it spent a lot of hours on it. They work 10 and 12-hour days on it. Once the statue is complete, we like to bring them out here and show it off a little bit to them. MTI is a very proud company with what we manufacture, and I think they'll be extremely proud of this also.
My gosh, the fact that he did it, and we didn't know how it was going to come out, but we were asking him to do it. And I think he struggled early on for a solution. The Koan became the solution, and it's just a terrific gift to Georgia Tech. Being white as it is, you can see it through the trees. As you walk around anywhere, you're keenly aware of it. I'm thinking about its future. I think it's going to have a great impact on other things happening around it.
I hope Koan will inspire creativity and challenge the artistic and architectural goals of the Georgia Tech students and anyone who sees this piece. I hope it will help them understand that almost anything is possible. Hope it will remind them of John Portman and his legacy and his accomplishments in architecture, and it will inspire them to create amazing architectural projects all around the world.
Cities in general have signature architecture, and I hope that Koan is one piece that will serve as a symbolic presence of John and what he did for Atlanta.
The uniqueness of this assignment, more than anything, represents the final piece of creativity of John Portman. It seems fateful that the last piece of creative art done by John Portman is here in Atlanta at Georgia Tech and is a new direction. That is quite a conclusion to an amazing career.
Koan is all about seeking truth, and the truth is this piece will always represent the philosophy of John Portman, which is to do very creative, imaginative things, but to do it in a different way that makes it better, that makes it more interesting, that gets your juices going to realize you can keep improving what you do.
I get a lot of excitement out of refining and taking something and making it even better, even though it's good to see how can we do this better. After all, we are trying to enhance the quality of life so that you are really playing with the heartstrings of man.